I am Heidi Sands. I'm the vice co-chair for HEDCO, which is Hiawatha's Economic Development. I work at Hawkeye Electric, do safety. It's just right down the street, so probably see our signs around at multiple job sites. I'm the one making sure everybody's safe. You're at the Iowa Sports Center. For those of you that don't know, this is where Adrenaline Volleyball and Team Iowa Basketball is played. They're prep leagues. I'm sure some of you have driven by, seen this parking lot full, wondered what it was. It's glorified home for basketball and volleyball. They host tournaments, so that is why we've got chairs everywhere, all the Team Iowa signage, so that's what we got there. The Hiawatha Business Summits are a coordinated effort by HEDCO and the Cedar Rapids Metro Economic Alliance. Together, we sponsor these informational gatherings 4 times a year: February, May, August, and November. So please check our Facebook pages and check our websites for many of our activities and events, including the next Hiawatha Business Summit on May 20th. This morning, you came to learn about remote work and how business leaders can navigate the evolving challenges of remote and hybrid work environments while addressing workforce shortages. We're going to hear from experts who will discuss employment trends across the state and our local counties and see how businesses can be productive and effective when full-time candidates are scarce. Our panelists will draw on real-life examples from local companies, when to call employees back into the workplace, and when hybrid or remote work is necessary. This discussion may help provide advice for crafting flexible work policies that align with your business goals while meeting employee needs and adapting to changing workforce trends. Liz Mathis, HEDCO's coordinator, will introduce and moderate our panel, and Rebecca Solons, Alliance Program Specialist, will close our program with added information for you.
Good morning, everybody. Isn't this a surprising place? Hi, Chris. How are you? You walk in and you go, what the heck is this doing at the end of Robbins Road? But this is one of those businesses that is very necessary for a community. And, through the goodness of many people's hearts, this exists for, tournament play and for practice. And so teams are always looking for places like this. So we're very, very fortunate to have this in our community. So we are here to talk about the workforce and remote work and everything that goes into it. How many of you in the audience are remote workers? Okay. How many have been called back to the office after COVID? Yeah. Okay. So everybody's kind of experienced it in one way or another. Hi, Debbie. And so we're going to talk about it a little bit, about how we move forward from here, what has happened, what we're doing presently, and then what does this look like for the future. So we've got 3 experts here, 2 Matts and an Alicia. so a rose between 2 thorns, I would like to say, but not really. Yeah, I don't know the 2 Matts well enough to say that. So Matthew Auliff is the operations manager for the Northeast region of Iowa Workforce Development, overseeing Benton, Cedar, Iowa, Johnson, Jones, Lynn, and Washington counties through the Cedar Rapids and Iowa City Iowa Works offices, and also serves on the East Central Iowa Workforce Development Board. With nearly 8 years of experience in public service, Matthew has worked across various programs within the organization, including roles as a Promise Jobs Specialist. Some of you may have had Promise Jobs workers, career planner, registered apprenticeship career planner, and RESEA. Do you have it? Is it RESA? RESEA operations manager. In his current role, Matthew is dedicated to improving workforce development initiatives and enhancing services to local job seekers and employers throughout Northeast labor workforce development area. So we're happy to have you here. Thanks. Matt Walls, I'll go on the other side. The other Matt is the Chief Financial Officer at Benchmark, bringing over a decade of experience as a financial executive in middle market, owner-operated organizations. In addition to his expertise in financial strategy and management, Matt has worked closely with human resources and information technology teams, fostering cross-functional collaboration to drive business success. A certified public accountant. Is your heart beating quickly for April? It used to, but now it's okay. You're still traumatized. He is a proud member of both the Iowa Society of CPAs and the American Institute of CPAs, Chris Schulich. With his deep financial acumen And broad operational insight, Matt offers a well-rounded perspective on strategic growth and financial leadership. And we're happy to have Matt here because he's graciously offered to be here in place of Vince Ellison, Benchmark CEO. So Vince's name and face was on the advertisement for the marketing pieces here, but Matt has graciously come. Alicia Murphy is the Chief People Officer at Van Meter, Inc., a national electrical distributor headquartered here in Cedar Rapids. As the head of all things people and culture, Alicia is passionate about organizational strategy, alignment, and people-oriented programs that propel the company's 80+% employee engagement and nationally renowned reputation for its culture. Her programs have been instrumental in multiplying business performance, with the results of the 100% employee-owned company tied directly to earnings. Bravo. You'll often hear Alicia say, people plus progress to help maximize the performance of the company. The 3 Ps, right? The 3 Ps. So thank you all. Could we have a round of applause for their participation? So I think I put this in the email. Do you have any opening statements that you want to make about anything? Or you want to just wing it with the first question, and then you can fill in the blanks about what your organizations are doing and around remote work. So Matthew, let's start with you. Matt, let's start with you. As an employee of Iowa Workforce Development, could you just give us share some key statistics on remote work in Iowa compared to national averages, like trends? And are we seeing similar adoption rates, or are there any unique characteristics to Iowa's remote workforce?
Sure. So I'm going to be the boring numbers guy today on the panel.
Love it.
So I've been working with our labor market information department out of Des Moines. It was actually kind of surprising, but not really once I guess you start thinking about it. So with the state of Iowa, we are ranked 41st in the country for telework. If you think about that, a lot of jobs that we have around here, not just our region, but statewide, agriculture, manufacturing, that sort of stuff, you really can't do that when you're teleworking, right? The more professional level jobs, you get into HR, you get into sales, you get into recruiting. Obviously, you can do some telework in that capacity, but a lot of stuff is more hands-on in our state. So 41st in the country, Colorado's first, and West Virginia, Arkansas, and Mississippi are the bottom 3. So, which kind of makes sense when you think about it. Internet infrastructure is a big deal. I feel like we've got a pretty good one around here. I've worked from home from time to time and never had any issues, but you definitely need to have that capacity as well. So that's where we sit as a state.
Yeah, broadband access is big, isn't it? It's very big. So nationally, we've seen a shift in remote work trends post-pandemic. And I even do these business retention and expansion surveys. And when I ask businesses a question about COVID, they say, what? It seems like it's in the rearview mirror for some of our businesses, but maybe it's because they've adapted or adopted what is right now. So are there any emerging trends that you're observing, such as the rise of asynchronous work, the 4-day work week, or other innovative approaches to remote work?
I haven't heard of any around our area as far as any sort of innovations. I mean, 4-day work week sounds fantastic, right? I know it's
The
kind of
French
picking up.
do it.
Yes, it's kind of picking up steam across seas. Not so much in the U.S. yet. Maybe someday. It almost seems like Iowa's shifting back towards more on-site work. Obviously, COVID threw everybody through a loop. It's crazy to think that was 5 years ago at this point. Completely kind of changed the landscape of how we go to work and how we perform our work. Some companies stuck with it, but it seems like the trend in Iowa, at least, is we're kind of shifting back to getting people on site.
Mm-hmm. And so how do you see the long-term impact of remote work on Iowa's economy and its workforce as a whole? And are there specific industries or regions that are likely to be more affected than others?
Long-term impact with telework, obviously, is you widen your candidate pool quite significantly. You're competing with people in different states, it could be even different countries. Perfect example, my cousin is vice president of some engineering thing out of Des Moines, and he works with a team. He runs a team with somebody from Turkey, somebody from Russia, somebody from China. So they're always on business calls throughout the night. So you're competing with people like that, if they have the skills and they allow telework, you're now in a candidate pool that, used to be a couple dozen, can now be a couple hundred. So that's a big shift there. As far as our region specifically, can you repeat the second part of that question?
Yeah, it was, are there specific industries or regions that are likely to be more affected than others, maybe in particular in Iowa?
Yeah, so the specific industries is going to be the same nationally. So like I mentioned earlier, the HR stuff, the recruiting, the sales. Typically, you're on the road. You can do that from work. Even in our office in Iowa Works in Cedar Rapids, there's a lot of different stuff under one roof. Some teams can telework a couple days a week because some of their job is just simply doing telephone appointments with customers. You can do that from home. You don't need to come into the office for that. For my team specifically, career planners, we assist the people that are coming through the door. So it's just not a viable option. So it really just depends on the overall job description for each individual.
Okay, thank you. Now chime in for some of these other answers too as we go along.
Yeah.
So some employer perspectives. Returning to the office versus hybrid. Alicia, at Van Meter, you made a decision to bring your remote workforce back to the office. What factors led to that decision, and what have been the biggest challenges and successes in the transition?
Thank you, Liz. A couple of things I would say around Van Meter, and just to set the context a little bit, we have 850 employee owners across 25 locations. So when we started thinking about back to work, it's important to recognize a lot of our employee owners actually had always been at work, right? They'd been in our distribution centers, they were delivering our products, they were on site. And so many people think that Van Meter brought everybody back to work, but there's actually a large pool of people that were already there every day. The other thing that was really important is we had exponential growth really fast. So we started looking at our employee demographics. 50% of our employee owners have been with Van Meter less than 5 years. And so when you think about our company that holds our culture so dear, and we talk about everyone being an employee owner, right? Many of you are owners in your companies. Many of you are CEOs in your companies. We said, you're an owner, why wouldn't you want to come into the office and connect with your coworkers on a regular basis? So our culture is a differentiating factor. Our culture is what helps us attract and retain top talent. And we knew that our experience of many of our employee owners was going to be different. We also knew that 50% of our people coming in didn't experience that original magic of walking down the halls and seeing Danielle excited about the celebration meetings today, and having that personal connection, right? And setting that stage of getting rooted in our culture. So that was a really big thing. Culture was really important. It is an intentional business decision. And so when we brought everybody back to work, I would offer one of the challenges that caught me off guard, that surprised me, was there was a group of people that had sort of adopted hybrid work to serve their own personal needs and sort of created this own sense of personal flexibility. That caught us off guard because we had policies in place. We had a documented process that said, if you're going to be hybrid, you need to make sure that you're not providing daycare, right? Well, then when we brought everybody back to work, there was this kind of uprising of, but wait a minute, I have to be able to take my kids to work or to school. They built this life around what they had interpreted as hybrid work. That caught us off guard. And so we had to work through those situations. So that was a surprise to us. But when I think about our successes, I'm deeply rooted in it was the right thing to do. When it first started, I will tell you, I was a little nervous. I was like, man, Laura, like this workforce, I'm worried. What if we lose people? What if we can't hire people? But at the end of the day, we were so resolute in keeping that stickiness and the connection to our culture that we just knew we had to, exercise a new muscle, right? We'd all gotten used to being home, and now we're like, okay, you gotta start learning how to pack your lunch again. It's important that you come in. We did it in a phased approach. It wasn't all or nothing. When we first started, it was together Tuesdays, everybody come back one day. And then it was together Tuesdays plus an optional day. And then it was 3 days a week. It wasn't just all or nothing. But what we found was, even though people were coming in 3 days a week, they still had this sense of almost permanent flexibility. And for us, we had to swing that pendulum back to Van Meter has always had a culture that supports flexibility and work-life balance. But we just needed to kind of have more of a sense of collective, we're in this all together.
On that same vein, does it feel like you are back to where you were, or it feels like you're back to where you were and it's different?
I'm glad you asked that, Liz. I feel like we're back to where we were. It took us a couple months. It's just change. It's working through that change curve. But one of the best days recently I had was, we have a woman who's worked at Van Meter for over 65 years. Her name's Kathy E. Instead of what would Jesus do, it's what would Kathy do. And Kathy came into my office with tears in her eyes, and she gave me this big hug, and she said, "Thank you. We're back. We needed this."
Yeah, you hear that a lot. You hear that a lot. And then on the other side of it, you hear, wow, I love the flexibility of working. So Matt, at Benchmark, you've embraced a hybrid model. And what strategies have you found most effective for managing a hybrid workforce, ensuring there's communication, like Alicia's saying, collaboration, and a sense of community?
Yeah, so just a little background, we kind of had opposite situation of Alicia. We have about 30, 35 people in our Cedar Rapids office here, another 15 people in an office just outside of Milwaukee. And the remaining of our employees, 50 to 60 people, are spread all over the country. They don't have an office other than their home office. They're on the road 40 weeks a year visiting client sites. We're a commercial roofing and paving consulting firm, so we do a lot of work at large organizations. And so we had this situation where pre-COVID, our employees, a lot of them already were spread out, and we were battling this even before COVID. How do you connect all these people all the time? So it felt like we were almost swinging the other way of, we're kind of putting everybody in the situation that a lot of our people were pre-COVID, and that they had situations where they were working from home. So hybrid, just kind of as we were coming out of post-pandemic, I joined Benchmark right in the fall of 2022 as we were bringing people back to the office at all. And they talked about it, and they struggled a lot too with, what do? Do we bring people that were in the office full-time before back full-time, or how do we do this? And ultimately landed on a hybrid approach, like Liz mentioned. So our office-based employees are to be in the office 3 days a week. Now, that's not a hard, fast rule. Some folks have different plans set up, and we have some people that are coming to the office 5 days a week because they like to work in the office and not have the distractions. And other folks, because of personal situations, are maybe only in 1 or 2 days a week. And we do document those, so it's not just, everybody does what they want. The standard is 3 days, and we ask people to kind of have if you're in the office 3 days, what are your 3 days going to be? That it doesn't mean that on any given week you might have to switch it for some reason, but we do ask that they communicate so that people know. If I have an issue that I need to go over with a salesperson, I know the 3 days they're generally in the office, and hopefully can catch them on those days. And so the biggest thing for us is communication. In all directions. Communicate with your teams when your days are. Keep your Outlook calendars updated. That working elsewhere was something that got added to Outlook, 5 years ago or so when COVID happened. And so the biggest thing we found is, just that communication within teams and visibly to the organization, so that people just know where to find people on different days. We have found, though, that communication can go overboard. I worked on this with our team recently, where you started with, hey, I'm just telling people where I'm at so that they know where I am. It then became, I'm stepping out of the office to run an errand, or at 12:30, I'm going to take a late lunch. I'll be back at 1:30. And so it became over communication, and people's Teams channels and emails started to get flooded with a little too much information. So we pulled that back a little bit and said, we actually started a swear jar, if you will, within our finance team of, if you say something like that, you got to pay the jar. Get the big information out in front of people, but we're not going to micromanage. You know where everybody is every second of the day as well.
That's a good point. I didn't even think of that. Okay, so both of you, and I haven't excluded you. I'll get back to you, don't worry. both Van Meter and Benchmark, how has your approach to remote and hybrid work impacted your ability to attract and retain talent in a competitive job market? That's the first part of the question. I don't know if some of you are aware that the mayors of all 3 cities and then HEDCO, MEDCO, and the Alliance are trying to launch a talent attraction marketing program. And we've hired, the EA has hired, a talent attraction person. And she's getting to know everybody. She has a heavy lift to recruit people in 5 different cities to bring here. So, we realize, we hear from businesses that they need qualified workers. We've got to have more bodies. We've got to have more people here. So I'll ask the question again. How has your approach to remote and hybrid work impacted your ability to attract and retain talent in a competitive job market?
Yeah, I can start. For us, it's kind of opened the floodgates, if you will, because if we were searching historically for like a drafting position or a sales position, we were looking in the Cedar Rapids area for those individuals. Now we look anywhere in the country, maybe not California. I like to avoid California employees if I can.
That's one of Southern California is one of the target areas.
But employment laws, that's the reason.
But
yeah.
It's all the U of I and ISU grads, that's why.
But yeah, so for us, it's opened up a talent pool that we wouldn't otherwise have looked into, just because, our drafters, they can do their work anywhere, really. Our salespeople can meet with clients anywhere, and more of our clients aren't wanting to meet in person as much either. And so our salespeople can really be anywhere and do that work. So for us, the biggest thing is just opening up the talent pool to places we wouldn't have looked before.
Okay. Thanks, Liz. I would say Van Meter has an opportunity for alternative work arrangements. We also support remote work, but it's not a general policy, right? It's not a general practice, but we do make those exceptions. We do understand if there's a special technology that, person that we're looking for, or a critical role that we just can't find in this area. We're open to hiring in different places, but with a clear understanding and clear expectations of what that looks like. And how do we make sure that we keep people connected to our culture, keep people connected with our team? So we do have those opportunities. We are open to those, but as a collective group, our preference is, the closer people are to their physical location, the better. I would say out of the gate, at first, maybe when we were interviewing candidates at first, they'd say, I really want hybrid. But as the employment market and pendulum has started to move more to be an employer friendly, mm-hmm. and they just know that that's what it is at Van Meter, we're not having problems getting people, right? I think one thing that is so important is we have always been a company that adopts and supports flexibility. We support flexibility and we support empowerment. I am all in on that every day. When it comes to remote, when it comes to alternative work arrangements, maybe. It depends on the situation. But I think if you can double down on flexibility, that really is what those candidates are looking for.
Okay.
That's a great point. It's not always, I have to work from home 2 days a week just so I can handle things. It's, can I come into work at 8:30 so I can get my kids dropped off to school? Sometimes it's more about the flexibility than it is like the hard hybrid schedule.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, so this is for all 3 of you, and Matt, probably more generalities and maybe more specifics. So what are some of the best practices for managing remote and hybrid teams, particularly when it comes to performance management, communication, and fostering a positive work culture? So Matt, why don't you start?
Yeah, so the same time we were bringing people back to work hybrid in fall of 22, we were also really rolling out company-wide EOS, entrepreneurial operating system, which was really important for us, I think, at that point too, because it gave us a good structure and framework for communicating with our employees. So it like I said, it's a framework. So we have documents that we share with the whole company on here's where we're going this year, here's our plans for the next 90 days, and also has cadence of meetings that everybody in the organization participates in. So, once every week or once every couple weeks, our employees that, like I said before, were on their own in their home office or out in the field all the time, they get together on a virtual meeting with 5 or 6 other similar employees that are in other places around the country. So it starts to build that connectivity. And so I think that idea of having opportunities for people to be connected when they are hybrid or remote and don't get that interaction with employees is important. And then also occasions to bring the whole company together. We do a kind of a 45-minute announcement schedule meeting every Friday morning. Not everybody makes it every week because of commitments, and that's fine. We know that and understand that. But it does give that opportunity for people to come together, to get connected with people they don't see on a regular basis, and hear what's going on in the organization.
Alicia?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. What are some of the best practices for managing, particularly when it comes to performance management, communication, fostering a positive work culture?
As Matt on my right said, connection's important. And I think it takes intentionality, regular and often team building connections with that intention and getting creative about what that looks like. Half my team actually works up in Minnesota. So I have half my team in Iowa, half my team in Minnesota. And so we have to find ways to have creative connections on a regular and consistent basis. It's really easy for me to go outside my door and talk to Jenna or, to Emily, but I have other people. I have Nina and Connor up in Minnesota, and I have to make sure I'm connecting with them as much as possible. I also think consistency in technology is really important. When we first started, it was like Zoom, Teams, chats, text, and it just was kind of confusing. And so the more you can pick whatever your lane is on technology and use that on a regular basis, make sure everybody's trained up on that and what those expectations are, and leveraging that technology is really important. And I would also say inclusion. It's really easy when you have remote workers to forget, right? And simple things like when you have a team meeting and everybody's in one conference room and the person that's maybe remote is offsite and they're on their computer, it's hard to hear the discussion that's happening in a team meeting. So making sure that you call them out, ask for their perspective, let them talk first. We had a rule or a guideline when we were all remote for a while, or when we were coming back to work. I just said one person in a box. So instead of having, a team meeting where nobody could hear, it was like one person in a box. Everybody Zoom in so that there's that sense of similarity in our communication style and nobody's feeling left out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Matt, what are you seeing?
I've kind of seen it from both sides. So back when I was the Rosea operations manager, I oversaw 26 staff, and they were located statewide. So I had Decorah, Denison, Creston, Sioux City. I was in the Davenport office at the time, Cedar Rapids, Iowa City. So it was super important. The state utilizes Microsoft, so Teams was huge, still is. I always made sure that, it's hard when you're teleworking, you're not able to have that face on face and say hi in the hallway and, meet him at the coffee pot or whatever. So I always made it a point to get one-on-ones, which I know some people frown about, right? But it was important for me to be able to touch base with somebody at least once a month for 30 to 45 minutes just to see how they were doing, review their metrics, go over stuff like that. Now that I'm back in the office and I'm in Cedar Rapids, also oversee the Iowa City office with my man Kevin back there. So it's almost kind of like teleworking in a way, right? Can't be at two places at once. So we're still effectively using Teams to communicate. How's everything going? Hey, we need this done. Is that customer showed up yet? We need to make sure this is done, stuff like that. Another thing is, like I mentioned earlier with Iowa Works, we have a lot of different programs under one roof. Some are on-site, some are hybrid, some are rarely ever in the office. They're in the high schools with kids for vocational rehab and stuff like that. So we've organized every Wednesday. We open an hour later to the public. We open at 9 instead of 8. And so we have a office meeting with both Cedar Rapids and Iowa City. We do it on site in Cedar Rapids, but there's obviously a Teams link so everybody can join. And we just review what happened over the last week, what's coming up over the next couple of weeks, share any successes, get the positive energy flowing, and then kind of break up and do our own thing.
And you have the ability to kind of see what all employers are doing too, with the people in your office who work with employers. And have you heard like anecdotal information on, some of the things that they might be doing, or something that was interesting or fascinating to you?
Not so much. It's kind of business as usual at this point, especially kind of with the customer base that we're seeing right now. It's more, I mean, we do get some professional level people in there that we assist with, but most of our clientele is going to be going for that entry level. Let's get you some money coming in. You know, they lost their job unexpectedly. Let's place you somewhere. Let's find something that matches your skill set. It doesn't have to be your forever job, right? I say the ABCs. Let's get you a job, a better job, and then a career.
Have you seen? Okay, now I'm going to throw you a fast one here. Have you seen a remote worker come in and apply for a job, a permanent job, or another remote job, or?
Again, not so much. We do get a lot of people that come in and specify that they want remote work, and the state's website, iowaworks.gov, does have a section where you can look for telework jobs, so they are available. They're hard to get. You know, obviously they're very competitive. Unfortunately, with the telework stuff, and this is kind of going off the rails a little bit, but a lot of stuff we're seeing now is fraud. So companies list themselves as a telework company. You know, they communicate by email. They'll say, hey, click this Teams link. I want to do an interview. They'll do an interview on Teams. They'll say, all right, you're a perfect fit. You're going to be a digital sales marketer for $32 an hour. Here's your paperwork. Here's your W-4. Give us your social security number. I've seen 3 in the last week. And so go to the police station, file a report, lock your social security. And I tell people, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. And these, I mean, they've done research. Like, they had a LinkedIn page. They had a Glassdoor. They have a website, and it was just somebody acting like they were them. And it's not them.
Good advice.
Yes.
Really good advice for everybody. So how can companies ensure that remote and hybrid employees feel connected to the company culture and their colleagues, even when they're not physically in the office? You mentioned one-on-ones are out. I don't know. I'm not hip to this. Like, what is
The younger generation doesn't want to sit in an office one-on-one with their boss and just talk, right?
Oh, really?
Yeah,
oh, that's not cool.
No,
okay.
Not cool. Let me do my own thing, right?
Did everybody know that? Am I just... Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Leslie. Okay.
Yep.
So more of a group, like if they're collaborating on a team, then it's more.
Yeah, and that's why we do the Wednesdays, right?
Okay.
We get everybody together for an hour once a week, and let's just come together and talk about what we need to talk about. And then,
Well, I guess my meetings with the city manager, we'll have to open them up to everybody.
Yeah, there you
So Alicia, what are you seeing? Anything interesting? Any anecdotal information about that?
A couple things I'd add to that, and we've referenced this. We have, company meetings once a month. We win together, we lose together, and I think that's really important to make sure that those people have that opportunity. We also, with our remote workers, we have an expectation that they do come back to Van Meter at least X amount of times per year, so that they have those opportunities, and then we're intentional about what that time looks like while they're there. We also have started doing some regional connections. So depending on how spread out you are, we'll try to bring people together like between Kansas City and Des Moines, and then we'll go there. Instead of trying to bring everybody back to Cedar Rapids all the time, we try to make those regional connections so that it is easier to connect on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. And then I just think leadership support is so important. One-on-ones might be out, but I tell you, I think they're just central to this whole opportunity, making those connections, being intentional about those connections, making sure you have a regular cadence in that. Another fun thing is our team has a text string, and we really make sure that we stay connected personally as well as professionally, which I think is important.
Mm-hmm. And what about you, Matt?
Yeah, I think I'm put me in camp too. That I don't think one-on-ones are out. But I think what I try and do with my one-on-ones is at least half the time in a one-on-one isn't like hardcore work related. It's, hey, how are things going? How's your kids? What do you got going this weekend? It's not just work. It's that connection to people that you build in those one-on-ones. And sometimes you do those over Zoom or Teams, and they're harder to do. That connection is harder to do over Zoom and Teams, but it goes back to what Alicia said earlier, that it's the intentionality. It's when you have those scheduled, you keep the schedule. You don't, it's just a one-on-one. I can blow that off this weekend because I got something else I got to do. It's that commitment to the communication in whatever way you have organized to really keep those connections with your employees.
What precipitated this Business Summit was that the city manager and I met with an employer who most of their employees were hybrid or they were remote. And so he had just had a meeting where about 150 of his employees came back. And then we walked in the door after that, and he said that it was so much energy and he just missed that so much, and that they were trying to get back to hybrid work at least, or in this conundrum of what do we do? How do we bring people back? Because in the business that they had, some of the really qualified and people that he'd had for quite a while, he was worried that he was going to lose them. So that's the conundrum. You mentioned broadband. So what tools and technologies have been most valuable to all of you for supporting remote or hybrid work? Maybe some comments that you've heard from people looking for work. And how can companies make the most of these resources?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's amazing in my career just how technology's changed. When I was a young auditor, I did most of my work on my laptop out in the field, and I had a big spreadsheet. I was just trying to work off my laptop. And now I've got a widescreen monitor. I've got 2 widescreen monitors in my work office, 2 widescreen monitors in my home office. I've got a decent sized travel monitor I can take with me and plug anywhere. And so the things that have changed just to make remote work and hybrid work easier, it's incredible. And so I think just tapping into those technology things, both from a software, the Microsoft Teams, the Zoom, things like that, but also the hardware, the things that make work so much easier to travel with as well are really important.
Alicia, any kind of technology that?
I don't really have anything to add to that one.
Yeah. Okay. And what do you think, Matt?
I'd say our biggest thing obviously is Teams. Get the Teams chat going, be able to have the video calls, and also we utilize Office 365 all day, every day, because we have multiple people working on one thing. You see it in real time, so it's super helpful.
Okay, workforce shortages. Thinking about shortages, you've got job openings, you're trying to fill them. What advice would you give to other employers who are trying to fill those positions, considering implementing or expanding their remote or hybrid work to address their workforce shortages? What would any advice to them?
Obviously, if you have flexibility in the workplace, you're going to be more attractive to job seekers. I can speak for Iowa Workforce Development personally. When I started there 8 years ago, we're paid by Iowa taxpayers, right? So we're responsible. We're at work when we need to be. If you were at work at 8:05 and not 8 o'clock, you're using 5 minutes of vacation. We had to be accountable, obviously. So even since COVID, they've opened up a little bit with flexibility to where, maybe your kid has a baseball game or a basketball game that starts at 3 o'clock. All right, you don't have to use an hour and a half of vacation. We're just going to flex that time. Come in a half an hour early for 3 days this week. Make up that hour and a half, save your vacation, stuff like that. There's some programs that after you reach your 6-month probationary period, you get a telework from home 3 days a week, which is obviously, widely sought after. So they're trying. Obviously, it's a little more difficult with the scope of the work we do. We're very customer focused, very hands-on, but there are some instances where we're able to open that up and allow people a little more flexibility.
Mm-hmm. Alicia, Matt?
Liz, I would say I'll get really specific. If you're thinking about having remote or hybrid work as one of your workforce strategies, I'll give you a couple of our lessons learned. And one of them is, I just want you to go into this with your eyes wide open, and that it does add complexity to your system. So you're going to have different payroll taxes, and you're going to have more stuff that you're going to have to work from, like an administrative function. You might have to reimburse people for travel. Just know that it could be a solution for you, but there might be some unintended consequences, particularly on the complexity that it might add to some of your processes. I do think you should also recognize that once that toothpaste is out of the tube, it's hard to bring it back.
Yeah. Yes.
Right? So if you want to do this, just recognize it's okay, but then you might have people all over the nation and you're going to go, wait a minute, I think that's not really good for us long term. Maybe it is, but if it's not, you're going to have a really hard time pulling it back. So just give it careful consideration as that option. You can absolutely do it It does work. You've seen, that it can, but just be really thoughtful about that. And part of that is outlining clear expectations of what it looks like, what it feels like, what it sounds like in your company, because it's important to have a level set across your organization so that you don't have your delivery drivers saying, well, they're never in the office, they're not working, right? Maybe they are, but it's important that all leaders know how this works, that there's a consistent understanding of how it works, that there's a judgment-free place, but then also those clear expectations with the people that you're engaging in hybrid work or remote work with, because managing expectations up front is so important so that there's not miscommunication on the backside. So I really am a fan of that. And then also one of our lessons learned is we put guidelines in place, right? We posted it on our internet so everybody could see. We said, we're going to review this every 6 months. We did, but we just didn't publicly talk about it. So it caught people maybe by surprise. And so if you are going to do this, I would recommend that you have your expectations outlined, you review them on a regular basis, and then you communicate them across your company. We've reviewed them. It's still working. We're going to give it another 6 months, folks, so that they understand that there's just that cadence of review.
Yeah, I agree with a lot Alicia said, especially on the front end. It's figuring out who you want to be, knowing there's no one right answer to that. There's lots of things at the extremes of this, and then lots of things in between too that can work for different organizations. So it's be thoughtful, know where you want to land. Don't be apologetic for where you land. Know who you are and be proud of it. And then I think the other thing too is, especially if you go down the hybrid remote lane, is don't be afraid to invest in technology for your employees. I talked about monitors and things like that. You may think of it as an added technology expense. That's true. But, if I said to you, how you feel about buying a $200 monitor, you might be like, If I say to you, how would you feel about investing $200 in one of your employees? You'd probably have a different reaction. So think of those kind of things as investments in your employees and not just office supplies expenses.
Great advice, great advice. We have about 520 businesses in Hiawatha. So when I do these BREs, I ask them a broad range of questions. And those businesses that have gone remote and left a commercial building, let's say it was leased, then I call the developer, the owner of the building, and I say, what's going on? Do you need some help? Yes. Right away, they did. I would say over the course of the last year, it's improved tremendously. People have gotten very creative with their commercial space, and they've turned it into some other things or recruited, businesses that were expanding. And so I think you're going to see over the next year, the Alliance and Headco as well. We know where our businesses are in Hiawatha and Cedar Rapids, and for that matter, Marion too. And the Alliance is going to do a top 10 big commercial space push to get people to either buy the buildings or lease the buildings, or if they're thinking about expanding, the availability of commercial space right now, that office space that's open. So keep that in mind as we're moving forward, because it's the worker, it's the employer, and then it's the expense of which side is it going to be. So right now I'm going to open it up to questions. I have some backups if you don't have any questions, but I'd like to open it up, and if anybody has any questions about remote work. Somebody, Chris.
Alicia, since you went from status quo before the COVID, then you went to all remote work and then brought them back. Did you see productivity changes? Were you able to measure productivity differences under those different environments?
Thanks for asking that. We didn't, we're not a real metrics-driven company, and we didn't want to do this because it was performance-based. But I have a lot of examples, right? When Blair says, "Man, I'm busier lately. Like more orders seem like they're going out," right? As a delivery driver, if the delivery driver can recognize that, right? When AP gets, their process is done 2 days earlier than they used to, You kind of wonder, right? What is the correlation there?
There's a lot of factors.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of factors, and I can't say it was one or the other, but we have seen a positive trend in our performance in general. We had, a tough year last year, but we're coming out of that. And I think most importantly for us, I love how Matt said, know who you are. And we are we are a company that doubles down on culture. And that was our why. And we definitely have seen, more energy that way.
Anyone else? Yeah. Our HR professional over here.
I just want to understand organizationally in your employee handbook, in your internal documentation, do you have a very clear black and white policy about remote work or hybrid work? Are they signing a contractual agreement at their annual review? Like, have you had situations where you've had to say, hey, this isn't working, we need you to come back to the office? Because I think some companies have gotten lax on some of the policy orientation. So I want to hear how you're managing that part of the written expectations.
Yeah, so we're an organization, speaking of culture, that has always had a culture that's very anti firm policy, employee handbook, that kind of thing, right? And that just grows out of being originally a small group that started in entrepreneurial and things like that. We're having to change some of that as we kind of grow up, right? But with this, it was communicated that office-based employees were expected to be in the office 3 days a week, and the communication of what that looks like and the exceptions from that is between the employee and their supervisor to work out. So we don't have necessarily documented in HR office of which employees are in the office which days and which are on plans separate from that. But we do set the expectation that leaders and employees work through that together.
Other questions? Other questions? Good.
States want 4-day work weeks. And I must say, my husband works for a company where they get every other Friday off. Half gets one week off, the other half gets the other. And first my husband was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to, because they wanted him to work a little bit more the week before. And it is a game changer. It really is a game changer for his company. And they did remote, obviously, during COVID, and they brought everybody back after COVID. And for my husband, I can speak for my husband and son, they said they were not as productive at home. I know a lot of people feel differently about that, but they were both excited to go back to work, and then they changed it to this. And both of them say it's everybody, the morale, just the flexibility. And they have a company that's very flexible. If you need to go pick up your kids from, my kids are adults, but if you have to go take your kid to the doctor and come back or whatever, they've been always very flexible. So do you think companies are going to do that around here? Have you heard?
I haven't heard, but that's great that you brought that up because Iowa Workforce actually kind of implemented that as well recently. We're on our second year doing it. They call it an alternate work schedule. Maybe you're not ready to take that dive into full-on teleworking with your employees. But if you have the capability, like Becky said, it is an absolute game changer. Kevin and I have several people on our team that come in instead of at 8 o'clock, they come in at 7 o'clock and they work 9 hours Monday through Thursday, and then they leave at noon on Friday, half day on Friday. We've got some people that don't have a daycare set up and they need to take their kids to school. So instead of 8 o'clock, they come in at 9 o'clock and they stay until 5:30. So while it's not working from home, it's not telework, just having that little bit of flexibility to allow your staff to know, okay, yeah, I'm going to work an extra hour a day, but my weekend's getting kicked off 4 hours early. It is a game changer. Like, staff morale is high with that.
Anyone else? While I'm back of the room here, anybody else? Okay. And would you say that contract work and remote work are very different animals? Right. So I have 2 kids, a daughter-in-law and a son-in-law, and none of them have worked in an office setting. My son is 38, his spouse is 36, hopefully getting a job at Google, moving to Chicago. She'll be in an office there. And then a daughter does remote work in Chicago, and her husband is also a remote worker. He has worked in an office. He worked in an office for about 6 years. But they work on contracts. And if they, it looks like in order to fill a job, the companies want to contract out because it could be a project or it's something very specific for a period of time for one client or something like that. But they file quarterly taxes, they do all of these things. And I'm wondering, the difference between remote and contract are very different. Would you like to kind of talk about that a little bit, where we're seeing trends of people just setting up their own? It's like a mini business that they're setting up.
We've actually, our consultants, we've had a couple individuals that have come to us in the last couple of years that do the kind of work we do, consulting work, that did do contract work and didn't like it and wanted to come have a full-time position, have the stability, know what their income was going to be on a month-to-month basis. So but I think that's one of those things, it's really individualized and what works best for the individual and for the organization. Us as an organization, we want the structure, we want them under our training. We have liabilities that we have to think about, so we really want them under our umbrella. And so we've talked about it, but really don't want to go the contract route.
It is a total hustle. It's like a sales job on top of your sales job. Yeah, absolutely. Anybody? Yeah, Rebecca. We're getting to the end.
I would say from the perspective of the Economic Alliance, we had trouble maintaining somebody in our events position. And, it's farmers markets. It's really early mornings. It's working with a lot of vendors on weekends. It's also just working on a ton of things that if you get somebody entry level, it's sometimes tough for them to handle all of that. And then if you get somebody else who was maybe more seasoned, it was maybe really hard to attract those candidates. So the person who used to do it was able to come back on a contract basis. And that's somebody we really feel like we can count on. And I do think that, it's probably working out better for her on a contract basis than it would have on a salary basis. So I think that is one of the things we're seeing is if you have a role that's really hard to fill or maintain, because we'd filled it and it kept turning over. That's just been a really useful opportunity for us. And we just feel like that person has flexibility to take on other things, but we really do feel like we can count on that person year after year to do these really high powered events that are sometimes too demanding for somebody else who is maybe not going to stick in that position long term.
Yeah, very good points. Yeah, go ahead, Alicia.
I think, workforce is always a challenge for all of us in a variety of different ways. And workforce will always be a challenge for us in Iowa. How do we make Iowa, sexy to live in versus Chicago, right? Right.
Not look outside, right. Turn away.
Right. And we all have to be open to what our needs are. And there is a place for contract work, and there is a place for consultants, and there is a place where alternative work arrangements where they're at. But I guess I would be remiss if I'm here at an Economic Alliance opportunity and we are all business leaders in these communities. I'm very passionate about asking all of you to think about the long-term impacts of what that means for our economy, right? When you are attracting and retaining talent that stays here with us, who invests their dollars at lunch, who, pays for daycare, who volunteers in our community, who keeps our buildings open, right? The more we can have talent here, the better. We will all be better because of that. And that's just my passion, and I feel like I have this opportunity to share that.
Yes. Amen. Amen, sister. I'm with you. Let's give them a round of applause before Rebecca comes up to close. Thank you so much for sharing your time. You don't get comp for this, I'm sorry, but coffee is that good. And Rebecca's going to close up our Hiawatha Business Summit on remote work.
Thank you so much, Liz. Thanks so much for spending your morning with us. I know there's some school delays and it's chilly out, but we're just so pleased with the turnout. Hopefully we continue to bring you topics that are of interest. And our next Hiawatha Business Summit will be on May 20th, and we'll be talking about childcare. We know that has been a challenge for a lot of folks, and we'll have some folks talking about different things in the legislature, as well as folks around town who have a childcare program that's really working and can provide some advice. So thank you so much again to our panelists and our hosts here at the Iowa Sports Center. I also want to give a shout out to the City of Hiawatha and HEDCO, and we love partnering with them with the Metro Economic Alliance. So we really appreciate you coming out to these programs. And we also want to give a big shout out to our friends at Metro who record these, so that way we can put that content on the HEDCO website. So big nod to Kirk back there, and know that if you had somebody who wasn't able to make it today, that'll be on the HEDCO website in the next couple of weeks. So also, we're always looking for additional contributors and hosts. So if you have a Hiawatha business that can fit 40 to 60 people. Sometimes we can limit that number based on your space. If you're interested in hosting, please let Liz or I know. And also, if you have anybody who might be interested in contributing to that childcare conversation in May, please reach out and let us know. But otherwise, have a wonderful morning, and thanks so much for joining us.